Hello, everybody. Welcome to Season 3 of Great Minds, People and Culture podcast. On today's episode, we have Nathan Friedman, Co-President and Chief Marketing Officer at Understood. With over 25 years of experience building iconic brands and leading high-impact campaigns, Nathan oversees everything from brand strategy and product marketing to creative and communications at Understood, a nonprofit dedicated to supporting people with learning and thinking differences. What makes Nathan's leadership at Understood especially powerful is his personal connection to the mission. Both Nathan and his brother have learning and thinking differences, which gives him a first-hand understanding of the challenges and opportunities faced by neurodivergent individuals. This lived-in experience fuels his commitment to creating inclusive environments, not just through messaging and design, but through culture and policy. Hi, Nathan. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
We'd love to kick us off with talking about your path from agencies to understood.org and what role your own life experiences play in choosing to lead a mission-centered organization.
Well, I was at agencies starting in the 90s, which is hard to say now. I've been in a variety of roles, both account, management, senior management, and doing a lot of different things and a lot of firsts. What I came to understand in my career at agencies was I cared more about the work than managing an Excel sheet. And I wanted to be in charge of kind of my own destiny, so to speak, right? Because when you're at an agency, you can do great work, but the client has to approve said work. And while we got clients to approve amazing work, there was always that desire for me to do things and see a real impact, direct impact. My last few years at a big global agency was filled with a lot of social impact work, focused on rolling out Obamacare or the Affordable Care Act, covered California, and a lot of other things that campaigns that helped people. I've also dabbled in the education space with some other clients we had, and that really raised my awareness of and understanding of the need to drive behavior change throughout different systems, throughout different populations to drive positive outcomes. When I left the agency world, I started my own company, really focused on startups and working with venture firms that had that bent to it. So organizations and companies and startups that focused on doing good in the world. And I met the founder of Understood through my consulting and advisory work. And that started a longer journey. I myself am neurodivergent. Fred Poses, who founded the organization, was looking for a leader to come in and help transform what we do at Understood from more of a content-focused organization to more of a longer, sustainable mission that drove change at scale and leveraging digital technology to do so. So it was in my sweet spot. It is near and dear to my heart, and it checks a lot of boxes for me personally.
Thanks for taking us through that. And what does understood.org do?
It's a great question because I think we do so much, but it's also been around for 14 years. So it's important to underscore where we've grown. We started out by really helping parents work with their children who learn and think differently. And learning and thinking differently are conditions like ADHD, dyslexia, et cetera. So we help that parent, we help the teacher and the pediatrician to ensure that child can thrive along their own journey of life. As we worked through that and identified there's actually a really secondary critical audience, and that is adult women that we need to support in a variety of ways, right? Women are misdiagnosed, undiagnosed, and have a lot of different challenges than men do relative to learning and thinking differences. And we also identified that a lot of our audience was actually women. Right. I think that, when childcare comes about, a lot of women are unfortunately in the position to be the lone driver in identifying differences. So Understood provides community, tools, and support for those who learn and think differently, primarily women and parents. We have the goal of putting 100 million people on a path to thriving by 2030, and we're doing that at scale. So direct access, free access to those tools, supports, and communities.
That's very interesting that women are misdiagnosed. Why is that? Has there ever been a research done as to why women are being misdiagnosed?
you're pulling at an interesting thread. A lot of the research in the medical field, and particularly with learning and thinking differences, is focused on men, then extrapolated to women. I think the statistic is like 99.5%, right? That's only 0.5% of research is done on women. 99.5% is done on men. I think there's, up until the mid to late 90s, women and a lot of these things were focused on men's diseases. Like women were not part of the diagnosis criteria. So they were diagnosed with hysteria, which is, we know where hysteria comes from. If back in the 1800s, it was a women's diagnosis for people who are pushing back and, and a variety of other things where people were focused on diagnosing anxiety or symptoms of learning and thinking differences versus the root cause. And then, there's disproportionate impact on women as well. So, there is no necessary reason why. It's that there's not been it's a combination of things. So it has not been in research. I think individual people who would diagnose are not necessarily trained on the difference. And there's also undue burdens of stigma and shame that come along with it as well.
Thanks for explaining that. You all recently did a study about neurodivergence in the creative industry. Tell us a little bit about that study and what were some of the most surprising takeaways?
Yeah, we did the study to really launch at Cannes Creativity Festival because it's all about creativity. And so we wanted to understand whether or not there's a higher prevalence of neurodiversity in the creative space. What we saw was nearly 1 in 2 employees who work in advertising, marketing, PR communications, and media identify as neurodivergent. That's nearly 50%, right? Publicly known stat and publicly quoted stat a lot of times is 1 in 5 or 20%. But I think our data shows that it's significantly more than that. And this underscores, particularly in this field, it's significantly more than 20%. It's 50%, right? And I think if you understand what neurodivergent individuals and employees can bring to the table in terms of strength, right? There's indications around problem solving, connecting dots, resourcefulness, the quote unquote dreaded word, which I hate, but it's part of this, which is thinking outside of the box, like think of new solutions, connecting those dots. And really a lot of this aligns with what divergent thinking and current research shows. And I think the other thing to say is while this has been identified as a group that over-indexes on neurodiversity, there are significant gaps of how neurodivergent team members in this industry are treated and how they feel that they can thrive at work, right? About 75% feel that neurodivergent creatives, feel they feel held back creatively, that they can't bring their full creativity to the table. And 90% of neurodivergent employees report masking their true selves, which means, they're twice as likely to mask when compared to neurotypical colleagues, which is a huge undue burden placed on individuals to come forward or address or perhaps even get reprimanded of some sort of way for having a difference. And that leads us to some other insights that came from the report where, about half the people don't talk about it at work. And 1 in 4 have faced discrimination or retaliation because of disclosing. And if you put that together with the time management challenges that is now facing the industry, particularly when it's more faster and things are getting commoditized, their creative is actually a key differentiator. So 1 in 3 neurodivergent creatives are unsatisfied in the role. By embracing neurodiversity at work, you can actually drive a lot of different benefits for the client, for the agency, for the team member, and for the business at large.
I have a couple of questions based on what you shared. Great data. Not surprising that percentage is higher because that's where the creativity mostly stems from, right? These people are incredibly creative and they bring a lot of energy into the table that the systems don't recognize. So do these people feel held back because the systems, the structure of the workplace is not really helping support them? Is it the performance review process? Is it the hiring process? Is it how managers try to manage? What is it about the workplace that's holding these 50% of creative individuals back?
It's actually interesting. It's a yes, 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 and more. It's a yes and. And so it's a combination of things, right? If you look at the population at whole, right, the 1 in 5 or 20% statistic is low. Our estimates are, particularly within Gen Z, which is overcoming boomers and to becoming one of the largest groups of employees in the workforce, particularly at agencies, up to 53% identify as neurodivergent, which is slightly higher than creatives, but it's on par, right? It's within the margin of error. And I think a lot of organizations, particularly agencies, don't recognize or are not yet recognizing A, the power of neurodivergent thinking, B, setting their teams up for success. And there are little things that have to and could be done that make a huge outsized impact that cost next to nothing. Right. But I think with this AI transformation landscape, the margin pressure, people worry for their jobs, and a whole bunch of other different ancillary factors, I see the industry putting the business before the people, which is almost putting creativity second, which is a weird place to be in. So that indicates that people could be overlooking marginalized populations, particularly the neurodivergent community and neurodivergent talent, and a pure play focus on productivity. And so if you do that right, I think that includes rigidity in how things are done, inflexible work arrangements. We've seen advertising agencies be mandatory coming back to work. Real-time brainstorms can be hard for people who can't process in that way. And so there's a lot of things people can do in the field, meaning in their own work environments, that can help, right? Give people a minute to process, send a pre-read in advance, record the meeting on Gemini so people can follow up afterwards, take breaks in the long meetings, be clear in instructions and follow up with recaps. I mean, I think what we're really talking about is best practice. And if you design through universal design, you're designing for the most marginalized population, which in this case, we're talking about neurodivergent employees, it helps everybody, right? And so the other element to that, you talked about, feedback. Who wouldn't like to understand how to give better feedback? Who wouldn't like to strengthen the way they give reviews? Who wouldn't like to strengthen the output? And so all of these things are kind of blended together.
I like to think a lot of organizations are not doing some of the tangible things, that the action items that you gave, because they just don't know how to. Is this where understood.org comes in to help organizations? Like, where do you all fall into the research that you've compiled for workplaces?
Exactly. So there's probably two or three ways, right? One, we have what we call a playbook of how we can help organizations structure a lot of these areas, right? How do you get executives on board and understanding the true power of neurodiversity, right? How do you get that to systemically work throughout the organization? How do you train? How do you give the skills necessary to managers to have constructive conversations? How do you ask people to stand up and ask for accommodations? So we have a variety of ways in which we help organizations directly. And if people don't want or can't or will not do that, right? I think there's a lot of companies that are pushing those types of things away, although I think it's a fool's errand to do so. There's direct resources that Understood provides to employees directly. So we have u.org/work, which is a lot of resources that both HR professionals and people can go to. We have a whole host of podcasts. We have, I believe, 12 free podcasts now, including a network called Misunderstood about, what happens when you are misunderstood? What happens when you have that ADHD aha moment? Like, how did you get that job, right? What are minds at work? And these are all different ways in which people can do and learn on their own without having to go through their company, if that company is a blocker.
And what was that website for the podcasts?
There's u.org/podcast. And it's also streaming on all the major platforms, Spotify, Apple, etc. Or wherever you stream your podcasts. They're also on YouTube. And the other link I gave was u.org/work. And that's where a lot of resources are, articles, downloadables, etc., and tips and helpful guides on how to thrive in your own environment.
That's great. Thank you. You've also explored the buying power of neurodivergent consumers. Tell us a little bit about that and where you're seeing a missed opportunity right now.
Going back to when we were talking about opportunities for agencies, right? If you think about just the agency or even on the internal brand perspective, you have the agencies want to make the CMO look good. And they do that by driving revenue. And then internally at agencies, you want to make the CEO of your agency look good by driving profit and new revenue opportunities. And so a lot of what we looked at was, okay, what people are missing in that is, what about that other leg of the table, which is, what about actual buying power of this group? And the research we did with Kantar indicates that this is almost a $2 trillion global group. It's a large group. And if you think about that and dimensionalize it with, there's parents, there's kids, 50% of Gen Z is identifying with this. There's people who are relating to this. And if you ask somebody in the wild, so to speak, if you go to any meeting, hey, does anybody heard of ADHD or know somebody who has it? In the rooms I've been in, nearly everybody raises their hand. So there's different ways to engage the community, but by overlooking it is not only, my opinion, ethically an ethical opportunity, but it's a missed business opportunity. People who are neurodivergent may have different influence. They're often early adopters, digital tastemakers, but they also set trends. Number two, there's impact, right? There's ability to put these types of employees in positions to succeed, but also have people think about how information is delivered differently, whether it's accessibility, whether it's creating content that resonates. The example I've given before is like, when I cook, my kitchen's a mess.
The best part of cooking.
Right. Have you ever seen a kitchen on a commercial that's a mess?
No, great point. I just assume that there's a husband coming to clean up right after.
Yeah. So how do you build that relationship, right? If you want to deepen relationship, you want to be able to engage authentically with your audiences. So think about how you can create content, whether it's commercial, and I've used a commercial in the vernacular, like any type of digital streaming doesn't need to be, CTV, but how do you engage? Where do you engage, right? There's a high overlap of gamers, right? If you think about that and think about neurodiversity, like, there's an opportunity to engage authentically, and that drives brand loyalty.
It's really interesting that you made that point about kitchens not being a mess in commercials. Any commercial that is so relatable just is always loved so much, talked about, everybody celebrates it. Why is it that advertising is still trying to display perfectionism in the ads?
Perfectionism or tokenism, right? And you don't want to other people. You don't want to say this is the typical, because with neurodiversity, there is no typical. Just because you have ADHD or dyslexia doesn't mean it's the same for everybody. There's severity, there is comorbidities, and like everything in life, it's a spectrum, right? Things aren't binary. So, there are ways in which to weave in how people behave. And some of what we do is understood is consult and advise, particularly in agencies, to help people understand what it looks like to have a learning thinking difference and how that can manifest. We do it in certain aspects in Hollywood and with some people creating concepts and scripts and things like that, because there is neurodiversity in life, but how it manifests should come across authentically.
Can you talk us a little bit about brands that you may have advised in the past or even currently, and how you're helping to ensure that neurodivergent inclusion isn't an afterthought?
I think that there's a couple that come to mind, and I'll talk about two, and there's probably more that we can go through. We have a partnership with TD Bank in partnership with Ogilvy Canada that raised awareness of their accessibility adapter, a browser plugin to offer customized accessibility tools, whether it's like font resizing, contrast, reading guides, etc. And by translating these digital features into a more physical, experiential event during Neurodiversity Awareness Month in Toronto, actually at a transit hub, we made sure that people were not only experiencing what it is, but what it can do. Because only around 3% of internet content is accessible. And we wanted to make sure that we could bring the difference of what the experiential activation was to people in real life. And nearly 14,000 people went through that experience. And the measured outcomes were really about the appreciation, the calm, the ability of what it unlocked, these tools. Another one, and this is completely different, but we worked with Hinge when they launched their neurodiversity and dating guides and things like that. And we did a lot of the research for them to show what it is like to have a learning and thinking difference and what those nuances are, et cetera, and interviews so it could be informing what they did on platform. And, we've worked with a lot of other organizations to really develop tools. How do you adapt AI for neurodivergent thinking? With Crayola, we do a creativity week for kids and parents. And so there's a variety of ways in which we've worked to ensure that the creative elements come through, but also they come through authentically and they deliver a differentiated experience for those who learn to think differently.
And for a brand or agency listening right now, what are some ways that they can engage with understood.org to get started in some of what you've shared?
There's a few different ways, right? Agencies, there's a variety of ways. Like we've worked with Havas and in a partnership to help them launch the neuro-inclusive practice. We've worked with Ogilvy. We've worked with a few other agencies. If there's interest in the agency work itself, like how does the agency work or how does the marketing function work? We have tools and resources, and I encourage them to reach out to myself or others on the team. There's understood/partnerships, which shows how you can get engaged. And I think for the work itself, right, that's the output or the product of what an agency does. There's different ways as well, and both those channels can help. So you can reach out to me and we can talk about it. There's understood/partnerships that also works on that, and in a variety of ways that we can make connections and help the product be better.
And on the workplaces, for leaders who may be neurodivergent or managing diverse teams, what advice would you give about creating space for authenticity and success?
Well, acknowledging that there is difference is probably the first step, right? We often see leaders don't want to disclose because they view it as a negative. Awareness reduces stigma. So having leaders come out and talk about it openly and what they need enables the other people on the team to talk about what they need and get the support they need to do their job better. And then creating an environment that is supportive of learning and thinking difference is also important. And these are no cost, low cost things. Some things are as easy as moving a seat in an office so people are not by a lot of noise or distraction. Some people do need noise and busyness, right? Like I can't work from home. I'm like, oh, there's a shiny object, and then there's like a cookie, and then there's like TV, and I'm like, okay, and then it's like 3:00, and I'm like, oh, I didn't get my work done. So if I'm in the office, that's the structure I need. But everybody needs something different. But giving me the time as an individual who learns to think differently to process something, setting the goals and the recaps of the meetings, I come more prepared. I come with more thoughtful insights, and I come ready to have a discussion. And that helps everybody. So we're not talking like in years. This is like send the pre-read the night before. Just give someone 10 minutes to read it or process it, whatever that might be. And those are little things leaders can do that will make a huge difference.
That's great. Thank you. And how about like structural or systematic changes? What do you think needs to happen in how we assess and support talent?
Sure, within agencies and marketing teams, there's a few things, right? I think if you were looking at accommodations as an option, make them proactive versus reactive. Proactively tell people where they can find them, how they can find them, and what the opportunities are. And what we've learned is agencies don't have to manage this themselves. There's companies that can do this as a third party, which get around some of the legal risks that some companies and agencies are taking. Number two is lean into flexibility, autonomy, and teamwork. These are both levers to increase creativity and productivity. So think about purposeful time together at work, not just time sitting in a seat and what those roles need. Third is leveraging tools. So you could have things like Gemini or Copilot or whichever system you use to capture notes. So if somebody's dyslexic, they don't have to worry about making sure what they capture is right. Or so with ADHD doesn't have to multitask, they can concentrate on what the purpose of the meeting is. Again, these aren't really expensive or time-consuming things. They're little things that add up to make a big difference. And one of the philosophies we had understood is small steps make large leaps, right? So each of these little things compounds and can deliver change at scale.
And to your earlier points, some of these help everybody. AI, transcribing notes, and sending a recap, they help everyone.
That's the concept of universal design, right? You design for the margin so everybody benefits. The classic example is with the Americans with Disability Act and curb cuts, right? They're created for people with wheelchairs, but we see curb cuts help everybody, whether you're somebody with a stroller or you're wheeling luggage or whatnot.
Or grocery shopping in New York City.
You got it. It's like there's the bad downside is the snow puddles in New York City, but that's a different thing. But I think, you want to find those opportunities and by designing and starting with the marginalized population, it helps everybody regardless of where you're at.
And as we wrap up, what's next for Understood? Any big projects or areas you're most excited about in the upcoming year?
Yeah. So, there's a bunch of stuff that we're really looking forward to. We are launching a few new projects and simulations this fall. So Through My Eyes is a free immersive digital experience that helps people really understand what it's like to grow up with ADHD and dyslexia and dyscalculia. And these are interactive simulations that tell real stories from kids' point of view that helps build empathy and help parents take those meaningful steps forward. For adults, we're doing a lot more focused on podcast and ways in which people can improve their own lives and put themselves on a path to thriving. So we have currently 12 ad-free shows exploring different types of neurodivergent experiences. We have in that network, we're so proud of it and the team that's behind it. I mean, we're surpassed 2.3 million downloads now. Some of our podcasts are in the top 0.5% globally. And then a lot of them are really focused on women and helping women, neurodivergent women, make sense of their journey and provide trusted resources and information to help people thrive at work. And lastly, we're doing a lot of work around awareness. And so we've done a lot of exciting projects, working with a lot of brands that are coming up. In October, we have brand partners that range from lifestyle brands, AI, tech companies, to more celebrity-focused entertainment brands that are joining, because this is a huge cause and this is a huge mission, and we need to work with through and alongside others to deliver the impact and shape the world for difference.
I love that. Thank you. And how can people find you and how can they get involved?
Sure. People can find me either at understood.org. We shorten it for the letter u.org, which is hopefully easier for people to remember. They can find myself on LinkedIn. Nathan Friedman on LinkedIn at Understood. And they can subscribe to our YouTube channel, any of the socials. We're on all of the socials, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook in Espanol, and more in LinkedIn as well. So we put a lot of thought leadership and attention to those. So, people want to reach people where they are.
Thank you so much, Nathan. Thanks for your insights and for your leadership.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you.